Well, hello fuckers. Welcome to another episode of the Linux Lads podcast, the not always safe for work podcast about Linux and related shit. My name is Mike.
My name is Connor.
My name is Shane.
And before we start talking about anything serious, what have you been up to, lads, this past time between our recordings?
Well, I think I'll go straight ahead. I have been distro hopping on my main PC, which we're recording on this on at the moment, which I very rarely do. So normally my laptop is my experimenty, doing all like trying out the various Ubuntus, trying out different distros and so on. So at the moment, I'm trying out KDE Plasma on Antergos base, and it's actually really good because I get the rolling release and I get the fresh plasma, but I also get the benefit of rolling, as in the latest kernel updates and all that malarkey. And I'm actually really liking KDE Plasma at the moment.
Yeah, Shane?
I've been going through my Steam catalogue and furiously downloading Windows games. Due to the ridiculous size of video games these days, though, I haven't actually taken any of them for a spin, but I have GTA 5 and Doom sitting on my hard drive, so that's what I'm going to do after this. So I'll report back with my findings.
Yeah, at work I had to play with Mac OS X, and I was again reminded about how great Linux really is, because basically what it is, there is a Mac Mini that we wheel out every year once and do something on it. But the things that we do, that it needs to be updated. So yeah, it is a year worth of update, but from a company that claims that everything is integrated and everything is really easy to use. It took me half a day of hard work to update the Mac to the newest version, with the newest version of Xcode and everything. Now on Linux, I would obviously re-download the ISO and just reinstall the damn thing. I'll be off with it within 20 minutes, and then let's say about an hour to move all my stuff where I need it to be. But unfortunately, with that Apple Mac, it's not that easy. So yeah, I've been being grateful to Linux again on the account of that. So let's get some discussion on the way. The first thing was, I think, edited into the show notes by Connor, the easy way to install Plex Media Server on Ubuntu 18.04. Connor?
Yeah, so now the Plex Media Server is supported as a snap. So your usual kind of snap install, whatever the command is, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's pretty easy to install snaps. On default Ubuntu, and the GNOME Software Center or Software Store, whatever you call it, has Snap support built in. So all you have to do is start searching for things, and you will see, oh, this is coming from the Ubuntu repos, this is coming from the Snap store or Snap repos. You can add in Flatpaks if you want, but it's just not enabled by default. If you're rolling your own distro, or if you by rolling your own distro, I mean if you're like installing Arch from scratch or something like that, or if you're running things something like Fedora or SUSE Linux or something like that, where they don't have Flatpak or Snap support by default, on their respective web pages they will say just install Ubuntu Software Center or whatever, add in these couple of lines for whatever distro that you're on, and then you will be able to search this Snap store directly from the GNOME Software Center. But the fact that the Plex Media Server has been added in is actually quite handy. It's Plex Media Server essentially just means that whatever content is on your hard drive, you can stream it across the network to another device that also has Plex installed, and you'll get all your artwork from the various movies. It'll transcode it across if it's in a weird obscure format, or if you want to go from 1080p down to 720p. If your other device doesn't support 1080p, it will do all that transcoding on the fly. So yeah, Plex Media Server, it's pretty easy to install now with the Snap Store. One thing I will say is, as MB Media Server is kind of a rival to it, but it's more freedom respecting. I'm not saying either of these are completely freedom respecting, but the MB server is just more freedom respecting, but does involve a bit more of a setup. Whereas the Plex Media Server is a bit less positive in the freedom dimension, as we like to say, but it's just simple. Just install it. If you have an account, log in with your username and password. I believe there are premium features if you want to go for a premium aspect to it as well. But pretty good.
Yeah, Shane, you have used Plex before, haven't you?
Yeah, I had a nice little setup before. I had a Raspberry Pi connected via Ethernet to my router, and that was stuffed in a drawer. But it had like a USB hard drive attached, and despite the kind of slim resources of the Pi, it served up the media without a hitch. It was amazing. But then on the TV, I had a Plex Media Server installed on my PlayStation 3 at the time. And it's PlayStation 3. And so I was able to just stream media files no problem from the Pi. There was never any issues, and the Ethernet connection made it that much quicker. On the Pi side of things, I used Open Media Vault, so that's a really handy tool. You just flash it to the SD card, and it's all through a web interface, so you can run it headless if necessary. But it had a ton of features, like a ton of plugins and features. Like you could, out of the box, you could do a Samba share to a Windows PC. You could do like a DLNA streaming. Just very, very well. I don't know if that's streaming, but DLNA, it just picks it up as a DLNA device, and without any additional steps or config or anything, it can pick up those media files. It's a really good piece of software.
Yeah.
One thing I will say, sorry, Mike, is I think the Open Media Server is based on Debian, is it? I believe so.
What, Open Media Vault?
Open Media Vault, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Media Vault. Sorry. Getting confused there between Plex Media Server and Open Media Vault. But I believe it's based on Debian. So if you know your Debian commands, you can it's just pretty simple to just update your server that's running Open Media Vault or whatever, because it's based on Debian and has all the additional benefits of running Debian as well.
I've tried Open Media Vault, and it actually has quite a nice web interface, even if you run it from the Raspberry Pi, so you can do most of the operations, including like dishing out Samba shares and stuff like that from the web interface. But as you put the Plex Media Server into the show notes this week, I tried to use it with my current Raspberry Pi setup, which is just basically Raspberry Pi running, I think, Mate, or Ubuntu Mate, and a portable hard drive stuck into it with no special server software on top of it, and it's just literally Samba Share or SSHFS. And then I tried running on a laptop the Plex Media Server, because it wouldn't, obviously there is no Raspberry Pi version for it. So I tried on the laptop and connected easily to the Raspberry Pi, and it didn't work. I would have to mount the Samba Share. So I went, because I was doing that in order to watch something, so I went to actually just running GNOME MPV and from the Samba Share watching my Agatha Christie's Poirot Mysteries episode that I've legally obtained. Yeah, Shane?
Yeah, I was going to say, you mentioned what were you talking about again? Is this what happens when you get into your 30s? You forget everything.
Yes.
Yeah, with you mentioned the you had to mount the file system with Open Media Vault. I found that what I had to do was create a hard symlink between the media folder in there and the folder where I had all my files on the external hard drive in the Pi. So it worked without a hitch then. It was like, I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head how the different types of symlink are different, but maybe you guys know.
Well, I think, I think it would be easy. It would have been easy for me to do it, but it was just easier to open GNOME MPV and VOC functions the same way. Basically, just reaches. You just need to first find the network folder in whatever you use for network manager or for file browser, and then VOC or whatever else can see it. I see the great thing about Plex Media Server could be if you are using it with a smart TV or with a PlayStation, with something where you just can't do what I just said. Next thing on the program is the 18.10 betas. So maybe by the time you are listening to this, Ubuntu 18.10 would have been released, whatever. Basically, Ubuntu 18.10 might be released by the time you are listening to it. We have tried some of the betas. I think for me, what I've seen were nice improvements. I've tried Xubuntu a little bit after a long time, and it looks nice, clean, and crisp. I've had a look at Elementary. I'm not sure if that's an official flavor, but they have a beta.
It wouldn't be, no.
They have a beta out as well, and again, like, great user experience. It's making some real opinionated choices about what user interface should look like and how it should work, but it works for them. And I looked at Kubuntu and I installed it on my main laptop, so that's going well as well. Have you tried any of these guys?
I've not. Well, I should say I am in my distro hopping phase that before I settled on this Antergos with running KDE. I actually did try just regular straight up vanilla Ubuntu default with Ubuntu 18.10, I should say. It actually worked out pretty well. The new community team, they've changed the name from community team to something more official sounding. The name escapes me at the moment, but that new team, it just looks really, really good. It's a nice fresh design. I mean, they were using the ambience theme, I think it was called. They were using that ambience theme for about 10 years. It was long overdue a refresh, and the new theme is actually quite nice. The code names for 18.10 is actually Cosmic Cuttlefish, which I actually think is pretty good. That got a chuckle out of me when I first heard about that. And the other flavors I've not tried, but I hear that the Ubuntu Budgie 18.10 release is actually quite a large update. I've not tried it, but that's what I hear. And Lubuntu is switching over to LXQT for their 18.10 release, so that should be quite interesting to check out. If any of the audience members or any of the listeners want to check that out, I myself might check it out sometime in the future, but the fact that they're switching over to LXQT is actually quite interesting.
Yeah, Shane, have you been tempted to give up your Mint desktop for a different Ubuntu or even a different distribution at all?
Not right now. I used to distro hop far more than I do these days. I like the stability of the Linux Mint version I'm using right now. It's I kind of crave simplicity and stability nowadays.
Yeah, that's also what happens when you hit 30.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it's just a sign of the times, I don't know. But I find that I want to just install a distro that works. It just I don't have to fanny about with anything. I just put it on the computer, flash it, install it, blah blah blah, and it's done. And then I can just start using the computer. So yeah, don't distro hop as much as I used to at all. I recently installed the Linux Mint, the most recent version, and it's fine. Like, doesn't get in my way. I do want to give other distros a kind of a whirl on my laptop though. So I may look into Ubuntu or Ubuntu on the laptop.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, was the Linux Mint Cinnamon or Linux Mint Mate that you're the latest one you're saying?
I'm using Cinnamon.
Oh, yeah, it's Cinnamon. I've used Cinnamon in the past. Before with this current iteration, when I'm on KDE, I used Antricos running Cinnamon for a very long time.
Yeah, I could never come to terms with Cinnamon. To me, it was always a bit too bland, boring, and I don't know. I know people like it. It's just me.
Sometimes boring is good, man.
Yeah, I know. I probably need something that doesn't always work or something. I don't know. Well, it looks like distributions are kind of getting into more and more into the background, and because we keep more of the time, we spend more of the time talking about desktop environments rather than distributions, and I think that's true across the board, all over podcasts and media, because what you see is always more interesting than what is at the back. Now, there is another thing that kind of diminishes the power or the influence the distribution and the maintainers of the distributions have, and that's the way you install software. Obviously, Snap and Flatpak are making massive headway onto our desktops and onto the servers, and that's a good thing because, hey, we have more software and it's more, or at least I think it's a good thing, and it's easier for software developers to package stuff for our platform. But there are discussions about, that Flatpak, for example, recently has been flagged as not secure. I think, Connor, you put it in the show notes. You want to talk about it?
And this was actually flagged from one of the listeners of the show, Joseph Fallon, on Twitter, at Joey Fallon, if you want to follow him. It was originally coming from the Linux blog Twitter account. So he tagged us and says, do you have any thoughts on this? I've looked into it. Now, I don't really have a massive technical background, so I wasn't able to read into this too much, but on the OMG Ubuntu article, the article will be in the show notes. It kind of breaks it down. They're calling it a bit of a security nightmare in quotes, which I think is a bit sensational. But I would say that any of these security flaws as they come up, I'm sure they will be patched in the latest version. I'm sure they're on top of things, but it's just something to be mindful of if you're running the version of Flatpak is the vulnerable version. Just be mindful of it, and I'm sure in the next version, which I'm sure the Flatpak developers will be aware of the vulnerability and will probably patch it pretty quickly.
I'm not sure if it's actually a vulnerability per se. It's more of an attitude developers take when they package Flatpak applications, and
I'm misreading it. So
and the expectations that the users have. So you always hear that Flatpak is sandboxed, but the sandboxing does not always have to be there, because as a developer you can choose what permissions you require from the user for the program that you are installing on their computer, or that they are installing on the computer, a bit like on Android. And I think the Flatpak project is well aware of this, and they are trying to, as also is noted in the OMG Ubuntu article, they are trying to come up with a system where you can decide what permission each binary gets, or each program that you're installing, what permissions you give it. So, as you said, it's probably going to be fixed eventually. We just have to go through this progress thing where things start from one point, and then there is a bit of a pushback because maybe they are not secure or not work as everybody would like, and we will eventually get to the point where I think Flatpak and snaps are the way of installing software on Linux, and from I don't know how many million of different package managers, we will be down to, let's say, 2 or 3 systems, which I think is a good thing. Shane, do you have any thoughts on the matter?
Not really, because I don't tend to use Flatpak or snaps very frequently. The one time I did use them, I didn't really see the benefit over just installing the program natively, to be honest. I'm sure it's useful to some people, but for me, I'm happy enough just to download from the repos and do it that way. So yeah, and in terms of security, God, I don't know what the hell I could add to that. Someone would need to draw me some very colourful diagrams and and show me exactly why it's insecure before I'd be able to comment on that.
I'll be something very similar with myself. I think the kind of the elevator pitch of the snap or Flatpak install method is if you're running a base that might be slightly out of date, and you want the latest and greatest software, or if you want the software to be kind of separated out, then you go for a Flatpak or snap model. Just to give an example, for example, let's say you're on Debian Stable. Debian Stable is notoriously doesn't have a lot of updates, but because of that, it is very stable because it's solid, it's predictable. But what if somebody says, okay, I'm running Debian Stable because I like that base, but I also want the latest version of Firefox, I also want the latest version of Audacity, or something like that, or OBS, the Open Broadcast software, or something like that, then you can literally augment the repos that you already have with some of the more of the latest versions, or even something that is completely unavailable on the Debian Stable, like Discord or something like that, that is packaged up, or Skype I think has as a snap as well. So you say, okay, I like my freedoms, I like the openness of the Debian operating system, but I also, for work, I need to communicate with Skype, using Skype. I know there is it's semi-bad example because there is the web interface for Skype, so you could just use that. But if you just wanted a desktop native version, you could just say, okay, I have Debian, so the only thing that is questionable in terms of respecting my freedoms is this snap, which installs Skype or something like that. So it's the whole idea is it's compartmentalized, as well as sometimes it might be a later version than what you're able to install on your using your default repos. So it's a personal choice, I suppose. Well,
also the snap packages auto updates, so they might be in the long run actually. They might be in the long run actually more secure than an unupdated package from the main repos. I think it comes down to everybody's choices and how well people are informed and how well people are, maintaining their system. And the thing is, if you are using Linux or even any computer, I would go as far as saying that if you are using a computer, you need to know how to look after it. It's like you have a car. You kind of need to know some basic maintenance as well as how to drive it, and you need to know the risks of using it, as with everything. So the same way you wouldn't plug a fridge into a socket if there's like a foot of water everywhere, you should be aware of how to maintaining, at least to some extent, how to securely maintaining the system that you are using for your work. And so maybe as well as making obviously snaps and Flatpak more secure, there should be also a way of informing the users how to treat their systems. There's another minor well, depends how you look at it. There's another kind of security news, piece of security news that I only heard on the Ubuntu podcast, I think two days ago. And it's about something that most of us use, especially the ones who distro hop quite frequently. It's about the application called Etcher, which lets you burn ISOs onto USB so that you can create live environment or USBs to boot new distributions from. Apparently there is a switch that says that you can stop it from reporting usage statistics back to the server, but the application, the version I think 1.4.4, actually ignores that setting. So far there's an issue about it on GitHub, and resin.io, the people who create Etcher, haven't replied to it yet, so I've really just only heard about it on Ubuntu podcast. But it is not great, because I'm not sure what kind of statistics it actually sends to them. I'd imagine was the name of the ISO, how often you use it, and maybe something about your program, something about your system, some data about your system. But it's not clear. As well as, just before I let you guys talk, it's not clear if it's them putting it in there, or if it's just because they use some JavaScript library from someone else that does that. So it's not clear if it's their intent or if it's just a mistake. Any thoughts, guys?
One thing I will say is Etcher is a very useful program. Before that was the program that I would frequently use is something called UNetbooten, which I think hasn't been updated in absolute donkey's years. So I'm not saying that UNetbooten isn't going to work, but it hasn't been updated. It might be insecure, and it mightn't have all the nice shiny new features that you want. Etcher seems to include all these. It seems to be frequently updated. Seems to have all these nice new features, and it's just really handy. It's kind of where's the ISO, where are you burning it to your USB stick, and then click start, and it's like really simple. So this is concerning that it does seem to not respect if you don't want to send your data off. But myself not being a developer, I would not be able to dive down into it and see whether it is, as you were saying, whether it's just JavaScript code that they just used and didn't realize that it would cause this aspect of it where it ignores the toggle that somebody specifically set, or if it's a deliberate decision. I suppose it's we'll just have to wait until resin.io come back.
Well, now that was Shane. Any?
No, because no, I don't.
I mean, my last note for this would be that real men obviously use Deeeelicious, which is a command line application, and take your GUI out of my lawn. Now to the big news that we
just don't DD over your hard drive, as I believe some other podcast host that will remain nameless accidentally DD'd over his hard drive.
Yeah, but you can kind of do that in it would be more difficult in Etcher, but you could probably just rewrite the wrong USB stick if you have two plugged in, or maybe put it on the SD card. But yeah, it would be more difficult to do than Etcher. Etcher is definitely safer than Deeeelicious or even straight out DD. Next bit of news is the one that we so missed last time, because as we were recording the last episode, Mr. Linus Torvalds went on about basically made a post as part of the kernel release notes saying that he's sorry for his previous behavior and that he will step back for a little while, take some action into making him understand people's emotions better. And at the same time or shortly after the new Linux Code of Conduct was instituted, which is a bit more, well, much more comprehensive than the previous one, and basically a whole discussion about meritocracy and about whether or not we should promote nice behavior in the workplace and whether or not it can negatively affect the quality of the code ensued. It's been, I think, about a month since. Things calmed down a little since that. Guys, quickly, what kind of thoughts do you have about, maybe generally about code of conducts and about this specific situation?
I'm actually quite glad that we're incredibly late on this one because the dust has settled. We've got over the burning like torches and get your pitchforks and all the angriness has died down. Linus Torvalds himself has had an opportunity to talk to the BBC to explain his rationale behind it, and essentially he's saying no, the meritocracy is not gone. Did you
just say meritocracy?
What?
Did you just almost say meritocracy?
Yes. He's saying he was saying that if you produce shit code, it'll still be shit code, and I'm still going to reject it. What he's reevaluating is his delivery of that message. He's not saying that, oh, now I'm going to be dancing on eggshells and, oh, maybe I'll let in this piece of code because I'm afraid of hurting this person's feelings. He's like, no, frick all that. He's saying, if your code is shit, your code is still going to be shit. It's just, he just has to reevaluate the way he interacts with people, and he fully acknowledges that he is not a people person. To him, it's like he's happy to be working away on his computer, dealing with a kind of a mailing list, saying, okay, I interact with this person for this reason, and then go away now, I'm dealing with my code. That seems to be where he's most happy, and then there's people saying that maybe you should kind of change your language a bit, and maybe you should, because not everyone interacts that way, not everyone thinks that way. So I think that's the reason why he's kind of taking this time off and saying, and he did say he's seeking professional help, saying, okay, this is how I deal with people. Maybe it's not the best way to deal with people. Get somebody in saying, okay, maybe you should try this approach rather than the approach that you've been using. So he's like, okay, I'm taking time off. I'm going to reevaluate, and then when he come back, I hopefully will be better. But he says it doesn't mean that shit code is going to get into the Linux kernel. Its code is still, the quality of the code is still paramount in his mind.
Yeah, Shane.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to make of it, to be honest. It was surprising, definitely, that he would, be so forthright about it. And, I never really saw the extent to which he went off at people on the mailing lists. I mean, I've heard stories, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. So, I suppose it's a good thing. He's, trying to do the right thing. I mean, nobody should be faulted for that. Code of conduct, that's always good. I mean, we always need to remind ourselves, to treat each other with respect in any community. So yeah, it's positive for me, but I don't think people should get too worked up about it. I mean, it's just one guy who wants to modify his behavior in some way, and yeah, sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, I think, well, this story has got two dimensions. One is the personal one, when a guy says, well, I've been an ass and I'd like to change that and I'm sorry and this is what I'm going to do. And I mean, that's great, because who has ever seen a person in his kind of position done something like that? Usually people are really crap at apologizing, as we mentioned last time. And he looks like he really wants to change that. And the other dimension is obviously the institutional one. Well, Linux Foundation is a big organization, it's a trade organization, there are massive commercial interests, and every company, I'm pretty sure that every commercial company that is part of the Linux Foundation has got a HR department. So there is no reason why there shouldn't be something similar in the Linux Foundation, because people were saying, well, meritocracy should be above some kind of a code of conduct, but I think maybe we should institute public decency as the first. Or that sounds horrible. Like being nice and respectful to one another should be above everything else. And as you mentioned, like, that doesn't mean that we need to start mollycoddling people and that we have to accept rubbish code because we want to respect them as people. No, I think part of respecting a person is respectfully telling them when they are wrong, because it helps them to grow. But on a personal note, I mean, I've never been a Linux kernel developer lead, but I've been in a situation when I worked with people, and I worked with people who didn't like the job, and I was responsible for the job being done. So that put me in an awkward position when I had to basically make people who, as I said, didn't like doing the job, do it to some standards. And I haven't always been the nicest person about it. And I can say that looking back, with this in mind, if somebody came back to me and said, well, this is not how you should maybe treat them, maybe rethink how you are telling them that their job is shit, and maybe don't call them idiots. If somebody told me that, and maybe if it was institutionalized there, I would have still said the same thing, but it would be it would be in a different tone, and maybe I think the people would be more motivated to work with me, because in the end, if you are belittling people, even if they know they are wrong, I think maybe they take it worse than if you say respectfully that they are wrong, and it's. From like my personal point of view, I think the code of conduct is a brilliant thing. I'm not sure, like, if they are, because they are still not. It's not still set, so they are still trying to make adjustments to it. So I don't know what it will look like in the end. If it is going to be in the same state as it is now, or if they are going to somehow massively change it. But I think it's a good thing that they are institutionalizing this, or instituting this. Sorry.
Whatever the current draft is, but as Mike said, this is probably subject to revision. I read through it and I'm like, yep, that seems to be pretty standard. I believe the exact wording of what they're hoping to introduce, again, it might be reworded, is used in other open source projects, and so it's nothing that's unique to the Linux kernel or Linux project. It's not that they drafted it specifically for this. It's just, believe it's just a standard code of conduct. And when reading down through it, nothing really stood out. It's rather than a bullet point of this is bad. It's kind of, this is bad, this is why, or this is the way you should approach this problem, rather than this is a problem. It's kind of more writing a paragraph rather than a bullet point, and it kind of just is summarized with, it was oft quoted when people were reporting this, was the Bill and Ted quote of "be excellent to each other."
Yeah, I think that's overquoted, and I think I don't know. I actually have to admit to something. I've never watched that film, so it doesn't surprise you, does it? Yeah, I've heard it tossed around, and I don't know. Excellent. What does that mean? Like, do I have to walk into the office with a massive grin and say and like shake the hand of everybody and tell them how good they look, or is it just like, is it something else? I would say, be just human to each other. The better part of human, where you try to. Even if you can't emphasize, which many people can't, I mean, it's difficult, and I'm not always the most empathic person, but maybe try to figure out how people feel when you are talking to them in a certain way. Try to do some mental retrospective and see if you can figure out some of the things that if you could say something in a better way. I think that kind of and that's the kind of thinking that a code of conduct will inspire. So Shane.
Yeah, I mean, I can't fault what you're saying. It helps, especially the elephant in the room is today's climate in terms of political beliefs and right versus left, all that nonsense. It's becoming like people's personalities, opinions, behavior is coming under a lot more scrutiny these days. So maybe it's a good idea in that sense to lay out some ground rules for how the Linux project should be handled and how people should treat each other and speak to each other.
Yeah, it's that you mentioned the left to right thing. It's usually associated with like conservative right-wing people, the fact that they don't like codes of conduct and PC correctness and stuff like that. And I used to listen to No Agenda just because I'm really a masochist for a while. And one of the presenters they are both very much pro-gun, what you call it, like when you are before they like their right to carry gun. Obviously they are from the United States, and one of them was saying they would berate something like a code of conduct or a PC correct or political correctness on a regular basis, and then one of them was saying, well, I can't wait for Texas where I live to institute the open carry laws. So when we all know that everybody has guns, we are all gonna be really good to each other. I'm thinking, well, then you substitute a code of you don't like a code of conduct, but you like you like a firearm to enforce the same thing. It's a bit of I think the left to right thing. It's a bit of a fallacy. I think everybody likes people to be respectful to them, and I think everybody likes like mutual respect and maybe even being excellent to one another. But I think it's been taken up and it's been hijacked by people who like politicizing things. And I think that dimension is not necessary. Like we need to make sure that people are behaving nicely to each other, because otherwise the kernel will suffer. There have been examples mentioned on in other media that people didn't carry on or maybe didn't join the kernel development team because they were worried about getting slagged by Linus and others, and about the whole culture of the development there. So, talk way too much, don't I? Next up on our program, there have been some data breaches. Basically, Google, just to summarize this, Google didn't say in February, I think, that they had a breach in Google Plus. They are shutting down Google Plus, but we will, I think, talk about it later. And then Facebook had a massive breach, I think it was last month, and at least 14 million people's accounts information has been revealed to hackers or something like that. This is happening on more and more frequently now. Another thing is that possibly there is some Chinese hardware hack where the computers distributed to major companies and maybe even to US government agencies have got some spying chip on them. Is security now becoming obsolete, basically? Should we all just live with the fact that whatever we do, say, and maybe even think is up there for everybody to see?
I've been operating under the damage limitation. In other words, you can't just say, well, Google has all my information, so I might as well not even care. I might as well get one of their Google Voice Assistant pods and install it in my house and have it constantly listening, because security is a mute point at this stage, and I might as well just give in. it is concerning that these things are happening, and it's the case of damage limitation. That's the reason why I'm no longer using Gmail as my main email address. I'm kind of slowly going off and using different services rather than putting everything in the Google services, which I used to do. And it's more kind of damage limitation. My just getting on the Facebook data breach. My understanding from listening to a tech news podcast where they kind of summarized it was the username and passwords weren't actually leaked. What it was the Facebook sign-in feature. In other words, when you can say, "Oh, I am I'm an administrator of a page, and what I want to do is I want to view my page as if another person was viewing it. So in other words, I want to temporarily take on their account or whatever, and say, okay, how does my page look when viewed from this kind of person? So you don't have access to the username and password, but I believe there's some kind of weird feature where like you essentially can view it as somebody else, and I believe that is what got access, and then you get full access to it. Like I think you can post, you can do things, but I don't think your username and password was actually compromised.
Apparently, and this is according to The Guardian from Friday, hackers were able to access name, birth date and other data in nearly half of the 30 million accounts that were affected. So let's say that affect, let's say 14 million people. And so information included name, relationship status, religion, birth date, workplace, search activity, and recent location check-ins.
But we didn't get your passwords.
So that's something. At this point, that's well, at least they don't have the password, but they can is this, I don't know about, this is probably very much and mostly concerning American citizens, but is it possible to maybe get defrauded, like commit some major ID fraud with these kind of data? Definitely where you live and how old you are.
I would imagine so. That once you have like your name, date of birth, location, that sort of thing, I'd imagine that quite particularly with phishing attacks, in other words, ringing up a government department or something saying, "Hi, I'm this person. And I would like to change my policy," or blah, 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 or whatever. And they say, "Oh, yes, certainly. Can you provide your date of birth?" "Yes, I will be able to provide my date of birth." And then the whole phishing attacks. I would imagine that once this is quite concerning in relation to that, where they once they have your just your name and your date of birth and your location and different things of like where you went to university, where you went to your secondary school or wherever, like something like that. Those kind of phishing attacks is quite concerning in that regard. So I don't know if that's kind of specifically US related or it could be implemented over here.
I had I just briefly, there was some post on Mozilla, on the Mozilla blog, I think it was a year ago or something, that just said, and there was one sentence that I remember, it said, "Your mother's name is XZTY97*L or something like that." When instead of putting your real mother's maiden name in those things, you just made up a string and treated it basically like a password. And it struck me like that's a really good idea. I would have never thought about it that way. And it's just some kind of it is a simple thing to do, but I think it would be very helpful in these situations where basically instead of giving like the second authentication, giving them real data about your best friend, your first car, or your penis size, you just tell them and something that only you remember. Shane, do you have any thoughts on that matter?
I guess it's just another reason not to use Facebook anymore.
Very true.
I've switched my stance on them though. Before I used to think they were like evil, but I no longer think they're evil. I just think they're inept because they're doing this a lot. Like when are people gonna start asking questions like, oh wait, maybe I shouldn't put my entire life on this one platform? So from my perspective, what I try to do with Facebook is I keep it up because I kind of need it to stay in touch with certain people. I mean, that said, I haven't logged into it in like 6 months or something. I just don't use it that much. But yeah, it's better just for me to not keep all my eggs in the one basket, so that, you know, all my personal information isn't just pilfered in one attack on one platform. Like, and not to give any one platform too much information or too much control over my life, basically.
Yeah, I don't like the fact that they require that you put your real name in there. For starters, that shouldn't be allowed. I know that they do it so that you, when you start posting something that might be illegal or hateful, just plain trolling, so that they, like, people control themselves more if their own name is there. But then, if they cannot guarantee that this information won't be compromised, then they shouldn't be asking for this kind of data. They should be perfectly happy with whatever data you give them. But then again, their business model is knowing as much about you as they can, so that they can sell that information to advertisers. And obviously security doesn't come into it, apart from maybe revenue protection, because they want to sell the data, so they would be happier if the data wasn't stolen. But it's probably not as important, because a data breach is a one-time event, and the data is generated every second. So I can imagine that if they have the choice between putting their resources behind getting more data about you and selling it more efficiently, and securing their platform, the security will always lag. Especially I've seen bits from Mark Zuckerberg's the famous testimony in front of the US Senate. After I've seen this, I have no faith in that company whatsoever, because the performance, it was ridiculous that somebody in that position can. I don't know how that even happens. I basically lack words. So, you know.
You mean it wasn't Mark Zuckerberg, it was his robot avatar?
Yeah, I mean, a robot avatar, if you put Alexa in front of the Senate committee, it would perform better, you know? Like, at least it would have some voice. I don't know, this guy, basically, it's like going to buy a used car, and the guy who you buy it to is, I don't know, Harvey Weinstein. No, that's a bad metaphor.
Wow.
You went there.
Yeah, well, yeah. Like, I don't know why I said it. It was weird. But anyway, yeah, Facebook is shit.
Segueing beautifully into Facebook alternatives. So the whole G Plus shutting down, and the whole thing of Facebook being shit and Facebook is leaking all your data, then maybe it's a possible resurgence for Mastodon and Diaspora and all the open social networks. Mastodon I've tried in the past. I believe it's kind of, to give you a rough approximation, Mastodon is kind of like a decentralized Twitter. In other words, you get a feed, and you can literally just type in a brief update, and then it goes out. It's essentially, it's if you're used to Twitter, it would be a very smooth transition going over to Mastodon. The difference is the community. There's a lot of non-tech people and just regular people on Twitter, where Mastodon is predominantly nerds and tech and anime fans and that sort of thing. Diaspora is more the Facebook user interface, in other words, where you have a predominant photo up on one side, and then you have a feed of the various people coming in. So if you like the Facebook layout, or that's what you're used to, then maybe try Diaspora. Whereas if you're used to Twitter, maybe try Mastodon. But Mastodon seems to be increasing in numbers in light of Facebook being absolutely shit and Google Plus being shut down by Google.
Yeah, Google, this is the news that Google Plus is going to be shut down, I think, in 10 months.
Yes.
They said, well, we had a breach in February, then it was found out, and we don't really... Basically, between the lines is Google doesn't get enough money from it, or whatever they wanted from it is not happening, and they are shutting it down. So we will now have to find a different way of consume massive amounts of GIFs and cat images. Shane, have you ever tried Mastodon?
No, I haven't tried Mastodon, but I have tried Diaspora. I liked Diaspora actually, but I don't know, the problems with these open and privacy-focused social networks are a few. Like, mainly, the main thing is the barriers to entry. I mean, you can set up a Facebook profile in minutes. Same with a Twitter profile, same with an Instagram profile. It's all very straightforward, no barriers to entry whatsoever. So I think unless a solution like Mastodon and Diaspora can match that capability and provide something similar, I just don't see them going anywhere. Like I'm very pessimistic when it comes to these open social networks. I just think it's just going to be the people who are into all this stuff are going to use them and talk to each other, and for extra, false credibility or, street cred, they will have their profile on Mastodon or Diaspora. But yeah, it's too clunky. It's too awkward for the average person to use.
I don't necessarily
even for me, like, I don't know.
Yeah, no. I don't necessarily think that this means that this is not gonna go anywhere, because Google Plus never had mainstream adoption by the non-technical community, really, and the only reason why it's shut down is because Google just can't give a crap about it. It's other than that, the community is there, vibrant, and it worked very well. So I think Mastodon might not get mainstream adoption, but there is enough interest in it and enough people to keep it going. It might never become like Facebook, but then again, I would not want to for anything to become like another Facebook. If you go and find a community that I personally prefer a community where I have some common interests, rather than just become part of a network where people are idiots and share things that they probably should stay that probably should stay in their heads. And I've done for us for Linux Let's I've set up Mastodon. The link is going to be in the show notes. I just did it now, so we are not following anybody or being followed by anybody. And it was very painless. Like, the only thing I'd say is that you need to know, it's not like mastodon.com. I don't even know if that exists. It's not one place. You have to select which of these pods you're going to be part of. So that is a bit of a complication, because it's not like Twitter where everything is one place and you just need to go there. But other than that, you make up some name, you make up some password, and you confirm you give them your email, you confirm that email. But I think it's even easier because it doesn't require that you give them your name, and it doesn't ask for any other things about you. So I think the barrier to entry is actually lower. It's just you need to first find a place to sign up in.
I just give everyone a summary. I believe if you Google or use the search engine of your choice, Mastodon, I believe there's a default one that was initially set up and that Mastodon themselves are hosting. I believe that is now full, and they're not accepting any other entries on that. But I believe as soon as you go there, they've set up another one on a different server, and they suggest that you go over there. I think it was Mastodon.social was the first one, and I think they've set up another one. There are different Mastodon servers, and some of them have their own rules, as in they're regulated themselves. Some of them are more lax than others. Some of them are completely and utterly like PC friendly, and they're like porn is bad, okay, and whereas other ones are like, yeah, post whatever you want as long as it's civil and you're not abusing people and whatever. But whereas other of them are like, no, keep things safe for work, keep things PC around here, and there's like no bad language or anything like that. There's some of them have a lot of rules, and some of them are like, yeah, we don't really care as long as you're not abusing people. But I suppose as Twitter is finding out, abusing people is a very grey area term, or is open to interpretation, and who's going to enforce that? Twitter are having a lot of time enforcing that at the moment.
Yeah, I think what I'd love to see would be like a social ID that you take around with you on the internet, like some sort of personal identity thing. I don't know how it would work exactly, but you can basically plug your identity into any network of your choice. So, like, I heard a very good argument somewhere, can't recall now where I heard this, but someone was basically saying if you want to change your email client, you're able to do that and people can still contact you. You know, why should we have this closed standard for social networks? Why can't you just, you know, pick up your, you know, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home kind of thing. Just plug your identity into a different social network that has different features, or that all your friends are on. And, you know, I don't know the intricacies of how this would work, but it's definitely worth exploring, like an online ID card, so to speak.
I'm not sure if that's exactly the same concept, but it might be somehow related to what Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the World Wide Web, I think, what he's trying to do now, some kind of a decentralized system for your personal data. That I think he means as connectable by means of APIs to different platforms. It might be something very similar to what you just described. The only problem with that is that he started with it, I think he came out with it 10 days ago, and since then no one has explained what he's actually trying to do on a level that I would understand, and I think that's from many people. So it might be it, but we just don't know until somebody manages to summarize it in a way that people can understand.
I don't think he's setting up a kind of social network as such, but it's kind of online storage. So I don't know how accurate this is, or I'm sure it's a gross simplification, but I heard somebody describing it as your own personal USB stick in the cloud. You can separate, or you can give out people's keys to certain aspects of it. In other words, you can say, okay, I have this folder filled with photos, and I can give you access to it, but that access can time out, or you can have access to it permanently, but you have absolutely no visibility of the rest of what's on that storage. So that's been the summary that I again have not investigated this myself personally, so I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I've been that's what I've heard has been summarized as like your own personal USB stick in the cloud.
Yeah, well, we'll just have to wait and see. Hopefully, that would be handy, that you are not beholden to one institution, because how many people have got all their photos on Google servers, and how are you ever going to get that back? Another massive piece of news that has been making the rounds recently is that Microsoft has joined the Open Invention Network and gave them 60,000 patents that they held in order to protect Linux from lawsuits and maybe patent trolling. It's lauded as a big step.
Microsoft hearts Linux these days.
Yeah, well, they kind of do. I mean, they would be stupid not to, because nobody knows how much money they exactly make on Azure, but Linux powers a lot of Azure, what you call them, like VPSs, a lot of Azure instances. So if they didn't like Linux, they would be just making themselves poorer. So there have been guys, I mean, have you heard about it? And do you think this is a good thing, or do you think there's some kind of embrace, extend, extinguish kind of tactics?
I have heard the news, and I do think it's a good idea, because regardless of their motivations, in other words, if their motivations are exactly what they seem to be, which they appear to be at the moment, or it's like, oh, we're going to pretend we're all Linux friendly, and but our real motivation is this somewhere down the line. The beauty of the GPL license is, in relation to the Linux kernel and other Linux related projects, is if Microsoft make improvements and the Linux Foundation or whoever's handling the whoever's the code maintainer says, that's actually a really good improvement, I'm going to take that in, or if they're saying no, that's shit, you can keep that fork of the code that Microsoft is working on. That could be all the way over there. So they have the choice, and then Microsoft can say, okay, we contributed this improvement to the code, but we're sick of Linux now, and we want to take back all our code that we've previously contributed to it. So they don't have the proprietary rights to the code that they contribute to Linux. It's like, once it's contributed to Linux, it's like, yep, thank you for all your improvements to the Linux code. Okay, bye, see ya, but we're going to keep all the improvements that you've submitted or you've contributed to date. So, I think we should really take advantage of the fact that Microsoft are in a giving mood at the moment, and that it's because Microsoft has a lot of talented developers. So in that sense, the tide raises all boats. In other words, they're positively contributing at the moment. I do believe that's a very good thing, and that will only improve Linux in the long run. If they get a new CEO tomorrow and they say, no, all this Linux stuff is bad and we're going to make all our stuff proprietary again, then it's like, okay, well, thank you for your contributions so far. Bye, see ya. That was a bit of a rant. Anybody else have any thoughts in relation to that?
I think it's all very good news. And a lot of people are doubting Microsoft's intentions here, but I don't know. It seems to me that they are being very realistic and very honest about this, and I think they're genuine. I don't think they're doing the usual, takeover and scorched earth kind of approach they took before, where they buy up a company and then just basically dismantle them from the inside out, just to remove the competition. But yeah, I don't know. I think they're genuine here. I think they see a real benefit to this. It's going to make them money. They're getting way more hardcore into the cloud space at the moment. So, with Azure, I think it's a good thing, and I see that handing over those patents as like obviously kind of like a peace offering or a tribute. It's like, hey guys, look, we have the best of intentions here. We want to help. Let bygones be bygones.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good thing. The people who think it doesn't go far enough is the Free Software Foundation. Go figure. Basically, they say that on top of this, Microsoft should do all manner of other things, basically guarantee that they will never sue Linux and so on. Or as they put it, the systems that you refer to as Linux, and then somewhere they mention that it actually should be GNU/Linux. And they also
I'd like to interject for a moment.
Yes, very good. They also say in their response to this that Microsoft should use the past patent royalties extorted from free software to fund the effective abolition of all patents covering ideas in software. This can be done by supporting grassroots efforts like the FSF and Software Patents Campaign. And so on, and Microsoft directly urging the U.S. Congress to pass legislation to the benefit of that. But basically, what they are saying, well, you made a lot of money on patents. How about you give us that, and we will use it for good?
What is literally what was occurring when you guys were making your points and when I was making my previous point is just speculation in the long term, like what Microsoft's end goal in this. I mean, do you ever see, it's a bit of a lofty goal, a bit of a rose tinted glasses from my point of view, but do you ever see maybe in 5 or 10 years or 20 years time where Microsoft basically just based their operating system on top of the Linux kernel, and where it's Windows as a service. In other words, you pay monthly for Office 365 and Office 365 will run on Linux, or you pay monthly for the additional features that Windows adds, but all of this is based on a free Linux kernel. I mean, and then we'll all have a common core that Microsoft is contributing to, that the Linux Foundation is contributing to that Google is contributing to, blah 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 blah. All a common core, which is Linux, and then they can add their proprietary freaking paid monthly services on top of that if they want to. Do you ever foresee that as something? I don't know.
Yeah, it could be.
That would be fucking awful. Imagine the reason why
Really?
things are shit are because they are the one thing that there is, and that's like Microsoft in the 90s. There was no competition, and Windows in the 90s were horrible. And I don't want this to happen to Linux. Like, I can see that it might happen because it would be a cost-saving feature or cost-saving thing for Windows if they manage to somehow get through the compatibility issues, because they need to be backwards compatible for everything ever written on Windows or for Windows. So if they manage to overcome the obstacles, they might be able to replace is it called the NT kernel still or whatever with Linux? But
the NT
but
kernel.
would you really want Linux to be just everywhere and to become the one monopoly kind of thing that doesn't have competition? And I don't think it would be good for anything.
I'm not necessarily saying it doesn't have any competition. I mean, but I suppose it's kind of a lofty goal, and the whole. I suppose what would make it, the fact that it's different is that it's open source. The fact that everyone is contributing to it. You can see the code. You can see the security vulnerabilities. There'll be a lot of eyes looking at it, and it'll probably make it very secure. It'll probably would mean that it'll be open to hackers as well, because all the hackers will be able to see the code and everything like that. But I suppose, I'm just saying that Linux is quite popular at the moment when it comes to servers in terms of supercomputers. I mean, they pretty much all run Linux, so I don't necessarily see Linux everywhere as a bad thing.
But at this point, it isn't everywhere. I think Linux on the supercomputers, you are like 500 of the 500 most or best supercomputers run Linux, but on the server, I think the market share is 60-65%, and I think that's what keeps it good, because there you have got the BSD crowd that is trying really hard to make a better server operating system, and you have Microsoft who still sells IIS or whatever it's called as a part of Windows. So I think competition, at least in this climate, in this social arrangement that we operate under, I think it's necessary. Shane?
I don't know. One while you were talking there, the one sentence that was on my mind, just replaying over and over again, is this the year of Linux on the desktop? It just sounds hauntingly familiar, all this stuff. I don't know. It's anyone's guess, really. I think they have good intentions, but yeah, it's hard to know where they're going with all of this, to be honest.
Next one up, the European Union again might have done something really bad about our data. Now, what it is there's been some kind of a vote in the European Parliament, that was meant to pass some legislation about self-driving cars, and there was a clause that it would be that the self-driving cars the data that the self-driving cars generate would not be able to be copyrighted. So let's say you buy a Tesla and it generates some kind of a data, and Tesla would not be able to claim ownership So which would be good, because we could use that kind of data for ourselves. Maybe we would not want to share it. Maybe we would want to share it with an open source developer to make some kind of a product for the car. Now, as there was a vote, apparently the European Popular Party members decided to step in and strike down this clause. And so, as it is, the data would be copyrightable. Now, I'm saying a lot of maybes and woulds. That's because the coverage of this matter has been absolutely awful, and because EU self-reporting is also horrendous. So I tried to look into it, and I looked really hard, and I can't find even which committee this happened, because it wasn't a plenary session. This wasn't a law being made. This was some kind of a committee where they decided to amend the legislation they were discussing, and it would be good to find out what stage this is in and how we can petition our EU politicians if we want to do something about this. But the only place I found anything about this was a Boeing blog, which was adopted by 2 other media. Nobody contributed any more information about it to it, and it was very thin on information. It just said there was a vote, the European Popular Party did this, and now there is a danger. But there is no saying in where it is in the legislative process, and I couldn't find anything on the EU Parliament pages, but that's just because they are fucking horrible. You guys have heard it by any chance?
I've not heard anything about this. I'm looking at the Boing article that you're referencing. Just when you're talking about that, the whole thing that all I could think of is it the European People's Popular Party, or is it the Popular Party of Europe? It's a vague reference anyway. But no, I don't haven't heard much about this. How about you, Shane?
No, I skimmed through it earlier, and yeah, it's all been very under the radar. But Mike, what are the implications of this?
Well, again, I have only the Boing article to go by, but so say your car generates data about where it's been, how well it runs, and how much I don't know what data car can generate, but basically about its usage. Now, if it wasn't copyrightable, you could take the data, give it to your independent mechanic, and say, well, can you look at this and can you tell me if my car is fine, or does it need, I don't know, oil replacement or whatever, right? I'm making it up because I know shit all about cars. Now, if you make this data copyrighted, and if you prevent anybody from accessing, that means that you take your car to Tesla and tell them, can you have a look at it? Because I don't know if my car, maybe there is going to be like a little light that says there's something wrong with your car. But because you don't have access to the data, you don't know what is wrong, and you would be locked in to the vendor who sold you the car. Similar situation is what they quote in that article with John Deere tractors. Yeah, I think you might have heard of it. John Deere sells you a tractor, but you don't actually own it. You, I think, lease it. Well, there's some stupid license that basically mean that if you want to get it fixed, you have to go to them. And if you fix it yourself, you breach the license. So
it's the whole right of repair movement in the States.
Yeah, it's in this example, it's a copyright on. It's basically you buy something, but it doesn't wholly belong to you. So from all manners or from all angles, this is just, at least in my opinion, this is wrong and should be prevented. And I'm pissed because I couldn't find any information about it. This is a real failure of the tech press, because they could stop for 5 seconds wanking over a new phone every time it comes up and just pay attention about what's going on in one of the biggest political institutions in the world. Because I went through a lot of stuff that was there. I couldn't find this, but I found that they are pretty much in the European Parliament. They are talking daily about technology and how it might affect us. And there are laws being born from these kind of discussions, and nobody knows about it. because nobody reports on it, and because the EU, I don't know if they want it that way, but they don't report very well on anything. They just, I'm sure it's stashed somewhere as a PDF in all languages, where you can see, if you look at it with a magnifying glass, you can see who voted and what was it, but just deciphering their website is horrendous. So yeah, rant over, sorry.
Yeah, the EU is not great about telling people what they're doing. I think we've mentioned that many times at this point. Yeah, the publicity could be improved, and the transparency could be better. Yeah, that is. I see what you're saying, though. Yeah, that's because when it comes to self-driving cars and electronic cars or electric cars, that's going to become a big deal, because you're not gonna. It's like bringing your iPhone to an approved Apple technician. Like, you're going to have to do that with your car as well, which is not ideal. I mean, you should be able to bring it to a person who fixes cars in general, not the person who fixes this type of car. Yeah, so I really hope that doesn't present problems, because yeah, I read some banana statistic the other day that said in Europe and the developed world, we're all, like, self-driving cars are going to become the norm within 10 years. And I know that sounds like pretty ambitious, but they said, we'll take, for example, the horse and the first automobiles. They said, here's a picture of New York in 1913, and there's just horses as far as the eye can see. And then, or 1900 maybe, I'm not sure, but then 13 years later, a picture of the exact same street, and it's just flooded with cars, no horses to be seen. So they say it's entirely likely that self-driving cars could become, like, very, very ubiquitous in the next 5 to 10 years. So yeah, that could definitely be a problem.
Okay, well, this was a very heavy discussion, or actually 3 discussions. So to get onto something lighter and more elegant, we have boners. Well, at least I have a boner. I have a boner for application called Joplin, which is a note-taking application. It's actually more than one, because you can have the normal Electron application that runs on your desktop. There's a Android and I believe an Apple iOS app as well, and then there's a command line application as well. I use the Android one and the Linux desktop one, and it's amazing because it syncs over Nextcloud. It also syncs over Dropbox and I think Google Drive, and or just through file system. But the Nextcloud syncing, it just works so perfectly for me, because I have a Nextcloud instance, and it can it basically replaced Evernote for me completely. You can write the notes in Markdown, and it has got its little Markdown editor. You can obviously gather them into notebooks and give them tags and all that great stuff. So Joplin, massive props for them. Anyone else have any erection?
Yeah, I've got one. It's something very similar, actually. It's I think you might have heard of it. It's a personal wiki called Tiddlywiki.
I've not.
And it's basically a personal single file wiki that you can carry around with you, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's just a single HTML file, but then you load it up in your browser, and it's basically like an entire wiki. Like, it's not quite as complex as something like what Wikipedia is based on, but it's very handy for just taking notes and lists, and there's all sorts of plugins available for it, and I think you could write notes in Markdown as well, and it's just a handy little portable solution if you need your own personal wiki to keep track of things. It's really cool. It's just an interesting little project as well, because it's the fact that it's a single file and it's so small, and it doesn't store the data anywhere. It stores all the data locally. So it's pretty cool. I definitely check that out. Tiddlywiki. You need, I think you need a special browser extension if you're using Chrome and Firefox, and you need a specific app to read them on an Android device, iPhone, not sure, but yeah, it's really cool. It's a fun little thing to play around with.
I'm a bit bonerless this week. I've nothing.
Okay, and I think we are moving towards the end of this here episode. Unless, guys, you have anything else to say?
No, that's everything for me.
Yeah, I'm all talked out.
Yeah, so am I. So basically, we've been the Linux Lads. So you can find us on Twitter, now Mastodon. You can find us on Telegram group. We have a Telegram group. All these contact details will be in the show notes, as will be everything else, or links to everything else that we've talked about today. And
we also have an email address.
Oh yeah,
now.
We have an email address. Hooray!
Finally, woo!
Yeah, so that's show@linuxlads.com.
Yeah, so if you really like what we were talking about, send it to show@linuxlads.com. If you didn't like what we were talking about, that's a different address. It's dev/null. Send it there. No, I'm joking, obviously. If you have any kind of feedback, we will be more than happy to read it, hear it, or whatever. With that, well, I've been Mike.
I've been Connor.
And I've been Shane.